Hmm. Kevin, how you doing, man?
How's it going today?
Oh, it's beautiful, man. Thank you for joining us in this excursion into fatherhood.
Tis an honor. Tis an honor, brother.
Well, well, let's get right to it, man. How long have you been a father for?
Uh, of a blood-related child, I would say 9 years. But I have like a few godchildren I've supported in being. But definitely for my son personally, he's now 9. So I've been on this journey for 9 years with him.
Wow, I didn't realize your son was so old. So yeah, wow, how has that impacted your journey, man?
It's been amazing. One thing it revealed in me right from the start that I didn't even see coming, because when he first, when his mother was pregnant at the onslaught, I had all these fears about the idea of being a father, and how I'd manage or could I be fully dedicated, in relation to my purpose and other things I was doing. And then when he was born, what came through was just this natural nurturing, like dedicated space that I didn't even know was so elaborately in there, and that really opened up a space to know, like, to a really important tenderness that, especially as men, that's in there, that I don't feel like is always exercised enough, right, based on some of the old adage about life. And it's been really, that was probably one of the biggest treats to feel and experience with this child that we developed such a strong bond with, was this really willingness and free flowing nurturing aspect that kind of came through.
Wow, so it like opened you up to an innate depth of love you didn't even know was there.
Yeah, and you hear it often, like people share it all the time, even before. And now I say the same thing is, a lot of men would tell me before, like, there's a feeling, like there's no words that can describe it. You're gonna feel it when it comes, and it's so true. Like, just that innate feeling of this bond and connection to, your child. And it was really cool for me because when that nurturing aspect came through, I suddenly instinctively knew how to swaddle him, how to put on like his diaper. Like no one had to show me how to do that. I just knew how to do it. And I didn't even know, it's like, I don't know where that skill set came from, but it's there. And so all these natural things just kind of came through to tend to him. And yeah, yeah. So it was really cool.
Wow, that's beautiful. And it sounds like there's a connection to this, and you do a lot of men's work.
Mhm.
How has being a father impacted the way you work with other men?
uh, it supports a more comprehensive approach to life because you realize, we're all still, even as I'm growing and or supporting my son's growth, I'm still constantly growing and evolving, and so are all men, right, and women for that matter. But when doing the men's work, it's like you realize just how much the important dynamics of both masculine and feminine energy really are, and the importance of feeling emotion. So even when my child's, feeling things, the ability to allow him to feel and also guide him to something greater. And that same context is how you explore with, or at least how I do with creatorhood, and with the men doing men's work, is being able to get them to know how safe they are to feel everything freely, while at the same time being willing to know that there's more to them. And so that comprehensiveness of life, I would say that really, and also bringing more play into life. Like,
Wow.
because a lot of times as men, it's like we got to be strong in this, that, and serious. And it is so fun to just let yourself be playful, especially as you navigate certain things. And that element, I think, was huge, and have no doubts that that was something that my son would remind me of constantly, just by being him, that I often bring to a lot of things I do, to show people it doesn't have to be so serious all the time, even when you're working through stuff.
Wow, dude, that's like my mind's blown. So, so because I was just having this conversation about my last interview, and Eli, my friend, was giving me feedback, and he was like, "Hey, the only thing is just the seriousness, just bringing some fun." And but as a man, I naturally want to be like professional, this. But you're
Mhm.
saying your son just tapped you into the reminder that like that's not what it's all about. Like you can have fun on this journey.
Exactly. And it's fun because it's what's interesting too is that concept what you just were describing, because we had one of our Integrity Sons, one of our men's groups, we were meetings online. We were talking about that. Like they asked, well, what about bringing the element of play in? And I was telling them how not just a cool suggestion, it's so vital, because we even though we become adults and we become functionally responsible, there's still this playful side to us that's so important to exercise, just like we still have imagination, and knowing how to constantly tap that creativity is still so important. And yeah, like to bring that in, you could see it create this different air, even in the men's eyes, where they're like, it didn't even like cross my mind that we could actually bring more of that to it. And it was such a cool thing for me, because with the work I do, we go deep. We got to go in those dark places that are like, and to know that you can go into those and actually it be like a fun ride, even when you got to get those raw emotions coming through. It's such a really cool thing to navigate, and such a really important element, because that also ends up in relationships too. Bringing more play into relationships creates such powerful dynamics of masculine and feminine energy. So it's just a really important thing. And with my son, it was always that reflection of being supremely present and in the wonderment of everything all the time, and that you can play around with things, and you just have to know that discernment of being able to dance between both. And I think that really, like, having a son, though I still love to play around anyway, but having him kept that there at the forefront of my mind on a regular basis, and seeing just how much um, how powerful that is to bring with you in everything that you do in life
Wow.
is really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hear first of all, I hear everything's like allowable. There's like total unconditional love, and you bring a childlike sense of wonder to yourself. You allow yourself to be in the world as your son is in the world,
Yeah.
and it just reawakens you to being who you are, innocent, pure. And at the same time, there's a virtue that you're instilling in your son that's like, there's nothing you can't feel. You can feel anything, and you have my total unconditional support to go there.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
And then you're getting that for yourself, because in order to teach it, you have to be it. So you're allowing yourself to go there.
Exactly. I know, we live it. We live it. And it's, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so then you become both the example in the guide, because as you know, when it comes to kids, like they are far more attentive to what you're doing. They'll hear what you say, right? And if what you do matches what you say, it just doubles down. But if they're in contradiction with each other, they notice that, and they'll always respond more so to what you're doing.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. They're absorbing you based on who you are. They're not listening to what you're saying.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, but as I watch you do this, right, it's like they take that in because we're like their models, you know, and it's and that was really clear to me, which I'm grateful that I had a standard already prior to that, was with this insight that I was tapping into when it comes to guiding. It was not negotiable for me, and it was invaluable to say that I want to embody this to show people how to do it, not just talk about it and be like, so I hear there's a theory and there's information I've accessed. It's like, here's what it looks like as you live it. And that, to me, I think has been one of the biggest things as to why, you know, my practice lands the way it does, and also the way my son and I, you know, explore in our relationship dynamic too, is that embodiment, you know.
I imagine your son must really look up to you, the way that you approach fatherhood as a role model. I imagine that, I mean, this thing's called Father's Day Heroes. I imagine that you literally are your son's hero in his heart and mind.
I'd like to think so. I mean, he's very loving, and we have a really he's such a daddy's boy too, and I really love that. And it stands out to me, and we have these really beautiful moments where it's just like very loving, you know, and conversations. And he's always, and he says it with just random moments. He's just like, I love you, Padre. Like he just, it's there, you know, and you feel that. And I think about that often, like, because sometimes I just find myself sitting looking at him and I'm like, this is my son. Like I'm a father. Even now, even though he's 9, I still have those moments where it's like, this is my child. And with everything that I do, and, you know, like he'll come with me to events. I've brought him with me on set before because I was, you know, doing acting, and he's been with me when I do workshops, and he's seen a lot of the work I do. And sometimes I ask about it because he's very patient, which I'm grateful for, because I know sometimes he just wants to be with dad, but then dad's leading, like, you know, groups of people, and but he handles it really well. And the time that we do get to spend, he's very grateful for, and he always asks like when we can have time for that. And it's cool to explore with him because we'll have conversations and, you know, in intelligence battles about certain things. And when he notices I always have an answer for something, but it's a genuine answer and it lands. And I think that stands out for him. And the other thing is I'm really big on talking to him like he's a functional person, right? Like with kids, I don't, I honor his childhood, but I don't speak to him like he's like just a baby. You know, it's like even when he was younger, I would talk to him like you're your own person with your own thoughts, and and I want that to be something you become more aware of. And so we get to have a lot of in-depth talks, and he was able to kind of articulate things about what he saw, how he felt early on, because I didn't want it to be that thing where it's just like, do what I say because I said so. It's like, this is why I'm asking you to do this, so you have more information. And I think the comprehensiveness of being acknowledged as a person while also still being guided, because sometimes as a parent, you still gotta, you know, accountability, gotta crack the whip, still gotta have, like, you know, self-responsibility is a thing. He's really received that. But the bond to me is undeniable, and it's amazing, and it feels like an incredible responsibility, but one that I'm incredibly grateful for.
Sure. Yeah, it seems to me you're treating your son in a way that he's the leader of his own life, and you're letting him know from the get-go, hey man, this is your life. You get to say how it goes. And at the same time, he's also your son, and if there's certain lines he crosses, you step in, you say, hey, you can't do that.
Exactly. And he responds to it well too, which is cool, because I don't get hung up on the stuff of like, well, I want my son to like me or be a friend. It's like, when we're playing. If I have to tighten him up and have a conversation or call him out for something or own something myself, I do it. And I don't have a judgment about it or hesitate about it. And he always ends up responding really well in that regard. So, and then there's always something new every stage too, I find, that you discover little behavior patterns that develop. And it's like, oh, and here's where we're at now with this stage, and this is what we're going to navigate with this. So it's been such an ongoing journey of development for both of us, you know.
So he's 9. You haven't hit the teenage years. So it's, I don't know. I don't want to say what it's going to be, but what sort of challenges have you had come up so far being a father?
Um, I think the one that came early on that I realized the most was that being a parent demands your attentiveness and is not something in the way of your life. It's a part of it. So he, it's always, you got to always be on, and if you're struggling with something, I find that vulnerabilities is probably the number one key to continue to strengthen the relationship with a parent and child. And I would teach that a lot in some of my workshops when it came to parenting. But one of the challenges for sure is like knowing that it's important to always be on, but also to speak up. So I am a very like big advocate on make sure you're taken care of so you can contribute better. Don't play that self-sacrificing game about like I have to give up everything, because that's not healthy, right? It's like selfishness and selflessness to me are the same misalignments in polarity. So it was always like, what am I doing to make sure that I have the most energy to devote, to my child and everything else in my life? And when you realize you have to be always on because they're always watching and listening. Like I remember one time when he was probably like 2, maybe 1.5 at this point, because he started talking pretty early. It was probably like 2. We were driving, and I was at a red light getting ready to make a right turn, and I'm looking, and this car is like in front of us, and we're waiting for that car to go so we can go. And that car, there's no car coming, and the car's still sitting there, and out of nowhere, my son blurts out, "Come on, man, go! What are you waiting for?" And I was like, and immediately I was like, I saw 3 moments in my life around him where I'd said that, and I was like, dang, like it was immediate. He understood the context. He understood like, the moment. And so it was a really big check-in with, they're always watching. So it's a responsibility of always like practicing more self-awareness on a regular basis. And to me, being able to know how to be very present is the biggest key with kids, and also to me the strongest challenge, because I would find out that when sometimes I feel frustrated with him, I would explore why I feel frustrated like this day and not another day, even though he's doing the same exact thing. And I came to realize that I'm only frustrated when I'm not present with him. So when I'm present with him, I go, okay, here we are. If he has some homework or he has certain things to do, or we're playing, we do that. If I'm with him and I go, oh, I still have to send out that email and I have to finish this thing, I'm focusing on that. So then everything about him would be like in the way concept. And I was like, and I just caught that. I was like, oh, because then when I caught that and I realized I would just be deliberate, I would say, hey, baby, I'm going to do this thing on the computer, send this out real quick. What would you like to do while I do that? And I just started commanding space and time and energy with him. And he would go, okay, I'll do X, Y, and Z. And he was very responsive to that. And then as I kept doing that, I wouldn't then think about other things that I have to do. I'll go with him. I'm going to be here with him. And if there's time for me to do something else, then I will talk to him about it. And we would kind of develop that dynamic. And that took a little time to get a handle on it, with the ability to be supremely present and deliberate with the time, and then make sure that if there's other things I have to be responsible for, because obviously we work, pay bills, take care of them, that I still do that in a way that's not disregarding and not like, just go do something while I do this. It's like very attentive, and that getting to that standard on a regular basis was initially a challenge, because when you're used to living on your own accord, you don't think about those kind of things. But having a child that literally is dependent on you until they get bigger, you have to know how to navigate that, instead of like just giving them something to pacify them. Like, here, just take this so daddy can work. It's like, let me see you, right? Let me talk to you. Let me tell you what's going on with daddy. And then ask you, what would you like to do while I'm doing that? So it's like that space. And it developed a really dope relationship with us, where if I'm doing an event and he is there with me and he wants to ask me a question, he knows to like give me a moment if I'm in the middle of talking with the crowd, and he'll come and ask me something specific, and then we navigate it. And it's been really dope. But that was probably the biggest challenge initially, was navigating how to manage my life, which everything is more entrepreneurial, more self-developed, and take care of him at the same time, because he was with me so much.
Wow. Sounds like you had to manage your time. You had to figure out when you're going to be present with your son and when you weren't, not just pacifying him, like I guess a lot of people, they have video games and stuff, but like really giving him something to engage him, because you're always on as a parent, you're always on, is what
Yeah.
you just were saying. So
Yeah.
you have to manage your responsibilities in the world. And I want to ask you, has obviously a lot of people use the school system to give themselves an off button from being a parent. Has the pandemic impacted you, or is it just driven you deeper on what you're talking about?
Yeah, both. Yeah, like yeah, because it's helpful when you take them to school. That time slot is like, it's like I have all this time now to make sure certain things are managing, and and when he's there, it's like now he still has school, but you're there with him. So it took more creativity, right? To navigate. Well, I still have, a client session online. I still have this content to get done to prepare to launch my course. I still have these things, and he's here. And so for me, what I found is if you can create space where they're involved in the process, they're way more apt to um, abide by the guidelines because they get to contribute. And it's just like in a business, if people feel like they contribute, they're willing to show up in a more personal, dedicated, responsible way. And that's kind of what we had to do with them. It was like, so here between these times, this time you'll do this, and this part of your schoolwork. And then you'll have a break here. What would you like to do in that space? Would you like to do this, that? And he got to chime in. And I'd always let him know, well, daddy has this going on from here to here. And so it just demanded a lot more of that structural essence and a constant check-in with them, but they're there now. So it's not like that reprieve of them going to school and now you managing the time accordingly. It was, he's here. So everything you would normally do, it's still out on the table to do, but you want to guide them to a way that they're also recognizing that they can be responsible for themselves, and it also supports you. Because I feel like a lot of times kids don't always see their parents as a person. They just see them as their parent. And if you don't establish that you are a person with your own ideas and feelings, it's very easy for them to just go, no, I mean, you're supposed to do these things for me. This is what we're doing. But when it's like, because daddy's working on like navigating this, I could use your support in doing X, Y, and Z. And that was, I think, really landed with him well, in a way that he really honors my time when I'm dealing with things and respects that enough to then look at what he does. And then kind of handles that for me in support too.
It's beautiful. So it brings it back to what you were talking about, the virtue of bringing vulnerability into the relationship. You get vulnerable and you say, I'm a little overwhelmed. I got all this stuff going on. I want to be with you and I got to take care of this. And it sounds like you've invited him to co-create the relationship with you. Instead of you just creating the relationship, you've invited his feedback for how to have the relationship work as father and son.
Exactly. And it's really cool because you'll see him feel confident enough to speak up. And then I noticed though, in that I would end up having to catch a couple of patterns that would develop where sometimes they're like a little bit of entitlement will come to play, where he would start doing things or not doing stuff that I would ask, or passing it off till I'll do it later. And then we had to like break down and say, okay, let's look at the household stuff for a second. So this is all the stuff daddy's doing right at the house. Tell me what you're doing on your end. And just like one or two things. And I go, so would you like to take this over for daddy? You know what I mean? And I'll just do that. And he's like, no. And that perspective offered him like, okay, so I can then, make sure I wash my own dishes and I can. And this is now that he's a little older to do it. But even when he was a little kid, he's still a kid, but even when he was even younger, it was just finding a way to speak to him in a way he understand at that stage of development. Because they're aware enough to do it. They don't have the vocabulary fully. But if you can find a way to meet that, he'll listen. And even like with parameters of food, where I would say I would want him to know how to make his own choices, but I would give him parameters like, cool, so for dinner tonight, do you want to have spinach and carrots or broccoli? And it was like, so you could still make a choice, but you're going to have vegetables, and establishing, inviting him into the space, I found has been really effective for him recognizing himself as his own person and him being more respectful of my time and energy. Because that vulnerability, I teach in my practice that vulnerability for ourselves personally is a source of our greatest strength, because it's our open, honest expression of self. Bringing that into your relationship dynamics only supports greater reciprocity, greater understanding, and greater communication between both parties. And that absolutely applies with children even no matter what age they're at,
Does your son get vulnerable with you in the way you've taught him through your own actions?
Yeah. And sometimes I have to ask him questions for him to kind of explore. So we talk a lot about emotions, and when he's feeling something and I ask him kind of, he doesn't always put all the words to it yet, but we'll kind of explore the nature of what the feeling's like for him and why. And he takes time to kind of open about it and go there with me until he can kind of land. And I even when he's like, say if he's in trouble, I always let him know, like, here's what took place, right? Here's what we talked about before. Here's the choices you made, and here's the consequences, right? And I love you. You're still a beautiful child. Like, I don't do that. Be a good kid, bad kid. None of that duality-based functioning. It's just I love you no matter what. You're a person. You make choices. Depending on the choices you make, you have different results and experiences. Whatever you're feeling, it's important to feel it, and you'll still have to deal with the consequences for your choices. And these things are like create a really awesome space in that regard. So it's huge, man. Vulnerability is so impactful in every respect. Because even if I raise my voice to him sometimes, I'll catch that, and I'll let him know, like, Daddy, there's a better way for Daddy to navigate this with you. So I own that, because I don't want to, approach it that way. But I take responsibility for that. Here's where anger came up for me, but here's what I'm asking you to do, and here's what you did instead, even though we have this combo. So these are your consequences. And if he's crying, I go, so feel that. Cry, like, feel what you're feeling. It's so okay that you feel this way. Cry, then tell me your perspective. And then he would tell me why he's crying and the way he sees it. Then I would offer more insight for him, so we have both. And then still, here's, based on your choices and the consequences, this is still what's going to happen, right? But I'm glad that you share this with me, and that you felt your emotions. And then there's still consequences, so that there's like every area gets covered, and it takes a little more time. But this is a part of the game, like a part of the responsibility. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm choosing to be your parent, that's my responsibility to ensure I'm giving you all the information possible that you can make the best choices when I'm not around, instead of being like, because I said so, or just take this and go sit down somewhere so I don't have to deal with it. Like, that, to me, that's a part of the choice of being a parent, is the sacredness of offering all that you have, even if you're still struggling with it. Let them know that too, so that they can get the whole picture.
Wow. Sounds like you've taken the extra step to teach something in a moment, rather than just take the short answer to tell your son how to do something quick and easy. You've given him choice. You've taught him the impact of his choices, so he can start to be present, that when he does something, there's a consequence, good or bad, there's a consequence. And you're also, when he is emotional, you're showing him how to navigate his emotional body, which is a massively undertaught thing in society, adults and kids.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, I want to talk to you about this for a minute, because I was bullied when I was younger, and I feel that that it created this essence in me to have to be a strong man, and that's not always effective, to always be strong. And men go through these experiences, whereas if you cry, you're made to not be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then you lock up, you put walls up, and there's so many consequences for that later in life. And just because you can feel and cry doesn't make you not a strong person when the moment calls for you to be strong. In fact, that's an entirely different human characteristic to train on.
Straight up, yes, 100%. It's vital. At this point, I think everyone's now realizing the effect of suppressing your emotions, and that being so undertaught. There's a reason why a lot of things play out in the world the way they do, and why a lot of men are responsible for some of the most, like mass killings and certain, or the dropout rates higher for men, all these different spaces where, because it wasn't so widely taught that it was vital for us to feel our emotions, right? That it led to a lot of things that nobody saw coming. And there's obvious reasons. We can go into the history of things as to why. But yeah, to me, it was, you have to feel your emotions. Like, it's just, there's no way around it. But you don't stop there. Like, you don't feel your emotions just to feel and dwell. You do it because the energy is meant to be felt, processed, and used, so that he actually does something progressive with it. But at the same time, just like you say, like when you go experiences in life and you feel bullied, or all these different things, or you're having a moment and crying, when you see people struggle to deal with emotions, so they're like, no, don't cry, right? It's like, even in my friends group, we're like this. Our standard is, Around us, you're going to feel your emotions, you're going to take responsibility for your emotions, and you're going to look at what you want to change to experience something different. You're not going to go, well, these people made me feel this way, or I just want this feeling be taken away, or I guess I just have to deal with this. Like, our standard is, you feel it, it's okay that you feel it, and you're also not going to blame it on anybody, right? And then you're going to tell me where your standard is in life and what you want to change, and we can support that, and it's like that game. Because even Zen had a moment once where this one kid was messing with him, and he was like 5 or 6, he was in kindergarten, and he said this kid was messing with him. And I told him, like, the whole day I kept reminding him, you're going to ask this question, you're going to ask him this question, ask this question verbatim. And he finally got it. And the question was, when a kid comes to mess with you, just ask him, say, why does it make you feel better to mess with me? Like, what do you get out of that? What's wrong? And I just have him keep repeating that. And he asked that to the kid, and he was like, in the way he said, the kid just, he said he just had this weird look on his face. And then he kind of like, the way he said it was like, he kind of just, how do you say it? Like faded. I think I faded back. And then he just was really friendly and cool with him. And it was like, because it was a pattern break where the Zen asking the question got the kid looking at himself, and then not only looking at himself, being seen by somebody else, right? Someone's actually asking a question about what's up with me, right? Because apparently that wasn't happening at home in that way, which is why he was acting out. And so then he got really cool with my son, because he saw him and he got him at, like, checking in with something himself. And it was a really cool thing. And the kid never messed with him again. And then they were friends for that year before they, like, went into a different grade. And it's like the ability to explore with each other, and the ability to know it's okay to feel that. It's like, when this feeling comes up, it's not, well, just don't worry about it, just think of something else, or no, it's okay, don't. It's feel that. That's our number one thing. It's like, man, I'm so angry, feel that, be right there with that, and then when they finish, let's talk about it. And that's like, that's not negotiable in my reality. And it's a standard in creatorhood, and it's a standard in raising my son. It's a standard in my friendships, even in business. It's a standard for business. Like, something comes up in business, I want transparency. Feel what you feel. If you got something to say to me that you have an issue, trust me, I will gladly hold space for you and here, because I want us to be able to talk about these things, and not, like sweep it under the rug, or because then, it just leads to other things. So it's getting people to feel freely is like the next stage of human evolution. If we can get our kids doing it now, right? Actually teaching them the insights where, just like you said, hasn't been widely taught to kids or adults. You are literally setting the standard for a new generation. And I feel like that's also why the world's playing out the way it is, where you have people who are more offended easily and PC and want people to stop. It's because they're actually genuinely starting to feel more, but without the guidance on how to process it. And if you don't know how to process emotions, you're always going to blame something for how you feel. So, and it's, but you have to be able to feel more to want to change things in life. So it's like, it's a really cool tool that's happening, but when it's not guided with greater leadership, it just spills out all over the place. And that's kind of what happens when people all jump on someone because they said something that they found offended, instead of process their emotions and maybe raising a discussion about it in our society. And so if children can now know how to harness the things they're already feeling, and then not just that, but actually be able to clearly look at what they want to do with it and from it, you've now just started the new wave of human experience. You know what I mean? And he's kind of been a really cool, I guess, I don't want to say, I've said guinea pig before, but it's like, he's been kind of a test of how you get children to take this capacity of awareness, and play with it. So it's been really interesting.
I want to share something out of your share, but this was supposed to go for 30 minutes. Are you good for a few extra minutes? Like 10? Yeah, sure. I just want to make sure. So it sounds like you have given your son the ability to be clear that he's creating his life. Like for me, when I was picked on, I said, that's never happening again. And I went the total other direction, overcompensating, where you've given him the ability, instead of blaming and doing some sort of weird compensation, you've given him the ability to be clear that not to associate with it, but just to be responsible that emotion's coming out of him, and to use that to gather awareness about himself. And in the situation with this other boy who was, I guess, picking on him, he actually was able to open up an awareness for him. And what that mediated was conflict resolution. And what I heard was, the world's a little messed up because you got people who are feeling a lot, but there's feeling with blame. And so they're reacting to the feelings instead of just being responsible for their feelings. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Legit. Legit, yeah. And
Wow.
it's cool because, you know, at their age, you can catch it now, develop it now, because it's not so ingrained at this point or so familiar to them. Where the world, it's very familiar to do that, and so people think that that's just the norm, right? And yeah, so it's been cool to kind of navigate that. It's exactly that, where, you know, we teach everyone to take things head on, but you're not taking it head on in a combative way as if it's something to fight. You're taking it head on in a way that gets you exploring how to change the nature of your own, like, reality and environment in the moment, that honors you and the other person. And that's what I feel like what's missing in our society the most, because people don't sit and have conversations. It's got to the degree where it's just so built up that we're willing to, even when someone disagrees with us, automatically think that means they're against us and then react that way, you know. And then that leads to things like wars and battles and, you know, blowing people up and doing like different things, because we don't know how to actually have conversations when we disagree, and get to know each other more in our differences, you know.
Have you ever had, it sounds like you practice those conversations with your son, having conversations when you disagree and
Mhm.
finding solutions for those disagreements.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a great, that might be one of the most important things to teach a kid, is learning how to deal. And I guess that's politically what we're dealing with. We have people who don't agree. And the problem is they don't know how to have conversations when they don't agree.
Exactly. Exactly. I think it's one of the biggest collective skill sets missing in our society that we could. I mean, there's a lot of groups now starting to train that in people, but it just isn't such a wide practice in our schooling that people automatically know to go to that, you know? Yeah.
That's, I guess, part of where vulnerability comes from. Let me regress you through your past. I want to know a little bit more about
Okay.
your relationship with your dad, and if you carried anything forward, or if you alchemized anything for the benefit of you now being a father, or if you have any
Yeah, for sure.
memories.
Both. I would say both for sure. Like certain things, you know, in my parents' era was that concept of because I said so, and, you know, and certain things. But my parents, my father and my mom, they raised me and my brothers to be independent in thought. Like, think for yourself, dude. Don't just automatically go along with things. And I absolutely carry that over, because I literally built my life from that, of the ability to think for myself. And though I was very rebellious in certain respects and very revolutionized towards authority, um, we my dad, though sometimes I felt like there was sometimes emotional disconnection, he always told us he loved us, and he was always there to, you know, like, support in different ways. And that always stayed with me a lot. And there was sometimes we had a couple fallings out in different instances. One on his part, one on my part, at the time I didn't own, that I had to own, just from, like, kind of putting him in a position that kind of made him look inauthentic. And um, other times in our lives where I would do certain things and he would feel frustrated with it, and the way that he kind of came at me about it, those were things I had to end up working through as I got older, because you know, he didn't know how to process his anger at certain times. And there's things that he wanted to show up in as an awesome father, because he didn't, you know, he didn't have as much time with his father in his life, that when things went differently, he didn't necessarily know how to handle it or deal with it. And then I discovered that later on, there's certain patterns I played out as a result of that. And so one of the things for me, like, even, you know, when it was in the era too of being, like, you know, spanked or whipped and punished and, you know, physically, you know, reprimanded in that way, I didn't want to bring that for my way of parenting. And so, and I didn't want to bring the concept of just like, because I said so, but the think for yourself, be responsible, be articulate, like these things that. And it's funny because even I remember as I was getting older, even before I had my son, there were things my dad would tell me a lot when I was a kid. And, you know, as kids, we're like, we have our own ideas about stuff or like whatever. And I noticed as I got older, I would start saying certain things or talking like certain ways he had talked to me. And I was like, oh. And it was, but it's cool because he's, you know, he's an entrepreneur mindset. He's really charismatic and articulate and knows how to connect with people in a lot of different ways. And I think a lot of that transferred over for me too, even though as a kid, I didn't see much of that, but as he's been older and knowing how he negotiates certain things and do things, I can see where some of that transferred over. But, you know, he's a really big proponent on being community oriented. You have things to offer this world, so you make sure that you set a standard as being a better human to offer more of those gifts. And that was something he would always say to us, is like, to be a leader, to have greater standards. And and to think for yourself. And those things I absolutely carried over without a doubt.
Wow.
And yeah, for sure. And so I'm grateful for that tutelage, and for all the conflicts we had. I learned a lot about integrity and authenticity from my own way of operating, and where I'd make excuses for things that I would do. And then note where certain ways he didn't necessarily have the emotional maturity to express certain things in a way that wasn't so scolding or judgmental. Being in the space I am now with the practice I teach, I know how I could understand that, and then use that information to approach my relationship with my son differently in that regard.
Wow. So you really alchemized, I like that word, what your father gave you, where maybe things were challenging and
Mm-hmm.
it left you in a dysfunctional state in early adulthood. You were able to learn from all that, and those quote unquote mistakes your father participated in or did actually have bloomed into a beautiful flower for you.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Because I think one of the biggest things for me, in just in general, and with what I teach and everything, was always, I finally got to a point where I realized everything is always meant to be used. So there's never a waste, right? Like, even, and when you don't judge experiences and you actually really receive the insight from it, you'll know that there's always so much fruit to use in every respect, where to compound on things that are awesome and where to adjust when they're in more of a misalignment or limitation. And so I'm grateful I was able to do that with a lot of, dynamics in my upbringing, but I also had, a father and a mother that was there, and also encouraged us to be a self-sufficient, self-functioning human, and to earn your way and step up in your way. And they really instilled that. And those are things that really stay with me in that regard too. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'll acknowledge you're a upstanding human in our community. There's a lot of people respect you, and I say if the way you father is anything like the way you live your life, I can imagine your son is going to be an extraordinary man when he grows up. And yeah, and you're the type of person that has a message that people need to hear. There's hope in feeling. I hear there's a lot of learning that people can have by being authentic, vulnerable, transparent, in communication, working out differences. I love what you shared today because it wasn't just about fatherhood, it was universal.
Yeah, I appreciate that, brother. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, I want to ask one more question and I'm going to let you go here. I want to ask you, what's the best memory of something you're the most proud of as a father with your son?
Man, beautiful question. I would say the intimate moments of adventure. Like, there's still a time that stands out to me when his mother and I were still together. We stayed at this house in Miramar, right in front of this creek, and every single day we would walk along the creek, and we'd see the fish and the turtles, and we'd feed them, and the ducks and stuff, and we would always spend time looking, at these things and talking about life and being in nature. And he really loved that, and I feel like those memories really stand out. Just the intimate moments of wonder and exploration, and I still see that to this day, like us sitting there in that canal. And those are things, just at this age, that always stood out to me, and are a really powerful symbolic representation of ways I still want to approach him, where we are exploring the world together and doing it in a really um, bonded, intimate way in our relationship.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. So just letting go of all the agendas, being fully with your son, and going out in the world with no expectation of how the experience needs to be, but having a total commitment that it's going to be a fun, beautiful time because you're with someone you love the most in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, legit. Yeah, yeah, I love that.
Wow, man. You brought a lot of love and fire and heat and perspective. I felt this was very, very unique and very needed. And I love everything you do between the men's work and the healing work. And I just see so much of the work you're doing uh, during this time of turmoil getting catapulted. I just think now's the time to bring this mainstream. So thank you for being the stand you've been for. I know you've been doing this for a number of years. Thank you for doing it. And yeah, man, you're extraordinary.
Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you for being extraordinary yourself and all the beautiful work you're doing. And because you do a lot of work as well, and there's so much you want to offer the world and see everyone grow and develop in. And so I appreciate the reflection that you show in that, because it's very inspiring. And I'm grateful that you, even like creating this platform to offer this for us, so powerful and important, because it's so important to have these conversations for men in knowing like child raising, because it's such an important aspect of life that can be displayed in a far more healthier way. And I think like this is such a beautiful thing that you're doing. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of it and offer what I could share to do it, and for you to continue to put this out there and your heart out there, brother. I see you. So thank you for that.
Thanks, man. It's an honor to make a difference, especially I think we align on the men's movement, that it's not so much a lack of equality between men and women, which there is some issues there that are working their way out. It's more of a lack of a healthy expression of masculine energy in the world, where men have resigned or they've resorted to unhealthy forms of greed, lust, and manipulation, that a healthy masculine in the world could really lead forward a new era of possibility.
100%. Beautifully stated. Thank you, brother.
Cool, man. Well, I know you got your parents there with you, so I'm sure you're having fun, and I hope you enjoy. And let's reconnect soon once things settle for you, and touch base.
I would love that. Absolutely, brother.
Well, thanks so much for making the time, Kevin. Appreciate you.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate you, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
Bless you, brother. Talk soon.
All right.
Bye.